I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who posts about his life crumbling on Reddit. But here I am, writing this mess because I need to get it out, and honestly, I have no one else to talk to about it. I'm 34, married for 6 years to this woman, Sarah, who up until recently, I thought was my best friend. Little did I know, she had another friend in her life, King Uber driver. It started innocently enough, or at least I thought. Sarah doesn't drive, so she started using Uber more often. I didn't think much of it because it was convenient for her, especially when I wasn't around to give her a ride. But after a few weeks, I started noticing she was getting picked up by the same guy almost every time. I remember laughing about it once, like, "Wow, what are the odds, huh? You've got your own per. I didn't push it. Why would I?" She seemed happy. I was busy with work, and if anything, I thought this guy, Mike or whatever his name was just a part of her routine now. I even met him once when he came to pick her up. He seemed like a regular dude. Mid-30s, scruffy, with this beat-up car that smelled like old fast food. Not someone I'd ever think would be a threat to my marriage. But here's where things started to get weird. Sarah's trips with him became longer. She'd tell me she was running errands, maybe stopping by a friend's place, but sometimes she'd be gone for hours. And when I'd ask about it, she'd get all defensive. Like, "God, can't I just have some time to myself?" Or, "Why are you always asking where I am?" It was so out of character for her because, before this, we were open about everything. We shared our days, our thoughts, our plans. Now, it was like she had this separate life I wasn't allowed to know about. It wasn't until about 3 months ago that I started getting seriously suspicious. I had an off day, decided to leave work early, and figured I'd surprise Sarah with dinner. I was looking forward to it, just the two of us, no distractions, reconnecting after a busy week. When I got home, though, she wasn't there. I thought, okay, she must have just gone out with her friends or something. But then I checked my phone, and there was a message from her saying she'd be home late, something about getting a coffee with a friend. It didn't add up. She never got coffee late in the evening, especially not on a random Thursday. So I sat there, waiting, and then I checked the Uber app, curious if she'd been using it. She'd never been secretive about it before, so I figured I could see her recent trips. That's when I saw it. A trip she took a few hours ago, with Mike, the driver she had been using regularly. I thought, okay, maybe they just got a coffee together and were catching up. But then the trips started overlapping. There were trips where she'd leave the house, and the next thing I'd know, there'd be a receipt for a ride from Mike. This wasn't just a random coincidence anymore. And then, the trips started getting later. Midnight drives. 1 a.m. drives. The worst part? She was lying about it. I'd ask, "Hey, where were you last night?" And she'd throw out these half-assed excuses like, "Oh, Mike had to drive me home after I met a friend," or "We got lost on the way back, so it took longer." At first, I believed her. I wanted to believe her, but the more I thought about it, the more I started to see through her little lies. I started doing some digging. I took a risk and looked through her phone when she was in the shower one morning. I found messages between her and Mike, flirty ones. "Can't wait to see you again, you looked so hot last night, had the best time, when can we meet again?" My heart dropped to my stomach. I confronted her, but she just brushed it off. "You're overreacting. He's just a friend, and we joke around a lot." But her face, it said everything. I could see the guilt written all over it. Something had been happening. And I knew it wasn't just casual. But I didn't do anything. I didn't press further. Why? Because I still wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Or maybe I was too scared to face the truth. I was so damn stupid. The next few weeks, though, felt like I was walking on eggshells. I knew something was wrong, but she played me like a fiddle. She'd get angry if I asked too many questions, act like I was paranoid. But the tension kept building, and I couldn't shake this gut feeling. I knew. Then, the worst thing happened. I'll never forget that night. I don't know what made me do it, but I decided to follow her. I didn't tell her I was leaving the house. I just slipped out quietly after she told me she was going out for a quick drink with a friend. It wasn't even a particularly late night, but something in my gut told me I had to see where she was really going. I drove around the neighborhood, keeping a safe distance. She'd left a bit earlier than usual, and I could see her hopping into the Uber app on her phone. I felt sick as I followed the car, the same car Mike had been driving. It didn't take long for the ride to take them out of the area, into the darker parts of the city. I stayed back, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding. It was like everything I had been avoiding was catching up with me. They didn't head toward a bar. No, they didn't stop at some club. They drove straight to a shitty motel on the outskirts of town. I parked my car, my hands shaking on the wheel. My mind was racing. She couldn't be doing this. She wouldn't be doing this. But there she was, walking into a sleazy motel with Mike, the same guy she had been spending hours with. My stomach twisted into knots, and I almost threw up right then and there. I stayed in my car for what felt like hours, watching their silhouettes through the foggy motel window. I couldn't bring myself to go inside, couldn't bring myself to confront her. I wanted to, but I was too scared of what I already knew deep down. Then, around 2 a.m., they finally came out. But it wasn't just her coming out, Mike did too. They were both laughing, as though they had just shared some private joke. She had this stupid, satisfied grin on her face. And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just meeting him for coffee. They were sleeping together. I had no proof, but my gut knew. It was the only explanation that made sense. I felt like my whole world was falling apart. I decided then and there that I had to confront her. But I had to be careful. I knew this was going to get ugly. I had to wait until the morning. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat in my car, waiting for her to come out and head back home. When she finally did, she looked like she didn't have a care in the world. I waited until she had been in the house for a while, then I walked in. I stood there in the hallway, trying to calm myself, trying to breathe. But when I saw her, that fucking grin still plastered on her face, I lost it. Where the hell were you last night, Sarah? With Mike again? My voice came out hoarse, trembling. What the hell is going on between you two? Her face dropped. She knew. She knew I knew. But instead of being honest, instead of even trying to explain, she just stared at me with that bitchy, cold look I hated. She crossed her arms and said, "You're insane. I was out with a friend. You always have to make everything into something, don't you? Don't lie to me, Sarah. I saw you. I saw you with him. Don't you dare act like this is nothing." My voice was rising, the anger bubbling over. She let out a dramatic sigh and rolled her eyes as if I was the problem. Oh my God, really? You followed me? You're stalking me now? You're unbelievable. This is why I don't even want to be around you sometimes. You've been so fucking controlling lately. That was it. That was the final straw. I walked out of the room. I needed space. I needed time to think about what to do next. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to work anymore. I wasn't going to let her lie to me and gaslight me like I was some kind of idiot. I didn't say it to her face, but deep down, I had already made up my mind. I was going to get a divorce. The question was, how would I handle the fallout? How would I expose this? I didn't want to be humiliated, but I couldn't keep living this lie. It felt like a cold weight was sitting in my chest, suffocating me. But I was done. I was done with her. Done with this betrayal. The next morning, I woke up early. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, not without doing something. I needed to act, but I wasn't sure how. I needed her to admit what was happening, to face what she'd done. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump, but I had no idea where I'd land. Still, there was no going back. Sarah was already awake when I walked into the kitchen. She was making coffee, humming to herself like everything was normal. The sight of her, the woman who had betrayed me in the most intimate way, sent a surge of disgust through me. I didn't waste any time. I walked up to her, grabbed her by the arm, and turned her to face me. Her eyes widened in shock, but I could see the smirk starting to form at the corners of her mouth. "You're not going to get away with this, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You can lie, you can make excuses, but I saw you last night. I saw you with Mike." Her face flickered with annoyance, but she quickly masked it with that fake sweetness she was so good at. "Oh please, are we really doing this right now? You're really going to make a scene over nothing?" "Nothing?" I nearly shouted. "You were at a motel with him. You think I'm an idiot?" She laughed, but it wasn't the laugh of someone who was embarrassed. It was the laugh of someone who knew they had the upper hand. "You're just insecure, that's all this is. I've been with you for years, and you think a couple of harmless rides with Mike means something more? You need to relax, seriously. You're suffocating me with all this jealousy." Her words felt like they were slapping me in the face. She wasn't even trying to pretend like she cared anymore. It was like I wasn't even a person to her. I was just a problem to be dealt with, a nuisance. "Don't even start with that bullshit, Sarah," I snapped. "I'm done with your lies. I saw the texts. I know everything. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? Admit it." For a moment, she looked at me as if she was deciding whether to keep up the charade or just tell me the truth. But then she tilted her head, eyes cold as ice. "You really think I'm going to admit anything to you? You're not even worth the energy. I'm not the one who's been paranoid and controlling for months now. You've been suffocating me, making me feel like a prisoner in my own home." Mike was a breath of fresh air. He actually listened to me, unlike you. Her words stung, but I couldn't let myself get caught up in her manipulation. "So you've been king him behind my back, and now you're going to pretend it's my fault?" She crossed her arms, giving me a look that made me want to smash something. "Honestly? Yes. You're the one who pushed me to this. You've been a boring, predictable, controlling husband. You don't even know how to listen. Mike actually gets me, he sees me. And well, I'm just not interested in you anymore." Her confession hit me like a freight train. She didn't even care. She didn't even feel bad. She was just so cold, so dismissive of everything we'd built. I could feel the rage boiling inside of me. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was the fact that she thought so little of me. That she could look me in the eye, tell me I was a disappointment, and still sleep with this guy behind my back like it was no big deal. I took a deep breath, trying to control myself. "I don't want you here anymore, Sarah. I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes flashed with anger, but then, just as quickly, the mask came back. "Oh, you think this is some big revelation? Like I didn't already know you were going to do this? You think I care? You're pathetic." Her words were sharp, but I didn't flinch. I had heard enough. I had no more room in my life for someone who treated me this way. She wasn't the woman I married. She wasn't even pretending to care anymore. "Pack your shit and leave. I'm done," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm done pretending everything's fine." She stood there for a moment, eyes burning with fury, before she stormed off to grab her things. But I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of the fallout anymore. This was it. The end of the road. As she packed, she kept muttering under her breath, calling me names, blaming me for everything. I didn't listen. I didn't care. She wasn't going to gaslight me anymore. When she finally left, I felt a strange sense of peace, even though the anger still burned deep inside. She wasn't worth my time anymore. The life I thought I had with her, the marriage I thought was solid, was gone. And I wasn't about to beg for it back. But as I sat there in the quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. There would be more drama, more chaos. But this time, I was ready for it. The divorce would be my next step. And I was going to make damn sure she paid for what she did to me. The first few days after Sarah left were a blur. I didn't know whether to be relieved or angry. She had packed up and left in a frenzy, and honestly, I didn't care how much of her stuff was still at the house. I couldn't bring myself to look at it. It was like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong, every lie, every betrayal. I'd barely been able to sleep those first few nights. The anger kept me up, but more than that, it was the sense of disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could I have missed all the signs? I was so angry at her, but even angrier at myself. I couldn't stop replaying everything. The way she'd smiled at me when she lied, the way she'd gaslight me, making me question my own instincts. But the worst part? The worst part was realizing just how much she'd taken me for granted. I was nothing but a safety net, a comfortable option for her until she found something more exciting. That was the truth. She was bored with me. She needed the attention, the excitement, and I wasn't enough anymore. I hadn't been enough for a long time. Then came the legal side of things. I'd already consulted a lawyer, but the first meeting hit me like a punch to the gut. I had to face the reality that this wasn't just going to be some clean break. I wasn't going to just sign a piece of paper and walk away. Sarah wasn't going to make it easy. I knew she'd fight me every step of the way. And then came the messages. Oh God, the messages. Sarah started texting me almost immediately after she left. I thought she might apologize, or at the very least, try to make some kind of amends. But instead, she went on the offensive, as if I was the one who had wronged her. Every message was an attempt to twist the narrative, to make me look like the villain. You'll never get rid of me, you know. One text read. You think you're the good guy? You have no idea how much worse I could make this for you. I didn't respond at first. I couldn't bring myself to. But then another message came through, and this time, it was a full-blown attack. I was never happy with you. You were boring, you didn't care about me the way Mike does. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. That text, those words, hit harder than anything else. It felt like she was trying to drag me through the mud, trying to turn everyone against me. She knew how to push my buttons, how to make me feel small. I had to remind myself she wasn't worth my time, that this wasn't about me anymore. But damn, it was hard not to feel like I was losing everything. I did the one thing I knew would hurt her back. I got my lawyer to send her a letter. I wasn't going to just sit there and let her slander me. I was done with being passive, done with being her doormat. But things escalated quickly. Sarah wasn't just sending texts anymore. She started showing up at my office unannounced, trying to confront me in front of my coworkers. She'd even show up at my apartment, banging on the door like a lunatic. She'd scream, call me names, accuse me of everything under the sun. It was as if she was trying to provoke me into doing something, anything, that would justify her anger. I tried to stay calm. I really did. I didn't want to stoop to her level. But every time she pushed, every time she took another step into my life, it felt like I was being suffocated all over again. Then one night, I was getting ready to go out for a drink with some friends, my first attempt at trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy, when I received an email from her lawyer. Divorce petition filed. That was it. The moment I knew she wasn't going to let this go easily. She had filed first. Not because she wanted a quick resolution, but because she was trying to control the narrative. She was going to make sure she came out looking like the victim, no matter the cost. But the legal battle wasn't the only thing I had to deal with. The real chaos started when word got out. I didn't know how, but somehow, people started talking about Sarah and Mike, about their affair. And of course, some of our mutual friends began to pick sides. I was getting calls and messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, people who suddenly had an opinion on my personal life. It felt like I was in the middle of a high school drama. Some friends told me I was better off without her. Others, surprisingly, sided with Sarah, making excuses for her behavior. The worst part was when my parents found out. My mom's reaction was exactly what I expected, complete shock and disbelief. She asked if there was any way we could work things out, and I could see in her eyes that she didn't understand why I wouldn't just forgive her. My dad, though, was a different story. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He told me I had to move on, that I wasn't going to get closure from Sarah. He also made it clear that I needed to stop caring about her. I know this hurts, he said, but if she could do this to you, then she wasn't the woman you thought she was. Let her go. Don't waste any more time on someone who doesn't deserve you. It was exactly what I needed to hear. But even with that advice, the weight of it all felt crushing. I kept thinking about all the lies, all the time I'd spent trusting her. My mind wouldn't let go of the image of her and Mike, laughing in that motel parking lot. I was stuck in the past, but I had to remind myself that the only way forward was to let go of it all. The divorce was going to be a mess, but I knew what I had to do. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let her destroy it any longer. It's strange how things can spiral once you start losing control. I had thought, at first, that I would handle this divorce quietly, with minimal drama. But Sarah had made sure to drag me into every public scene she could, trying to destroy my reputation and make me look like the bad guy. At first, I just let her. I didn't engage. I didn't want to stoop to her level, even though it killed me to see her trashing me behind my back. But after a while, I started to feel like I needed some form of payback, something that would make her understand the extent of the hurt she'd caused. I wasn't going to just let her walk away unscathed, as if everything had been my fault. One day, I got an idea. I called up a couple of my closest friends, people who had been through similar shit. They were more than happy to help me out. The plan was simple. I was going to show Sarah just how messy things could get. I was going to expose her for what she really was, an unfaithful, manipulative liar. She thought she could have her affair with Mike in the shadows, but I was going to drag it into the light. I knew exactly where she'd be. Mike's been driving her to and from work every morning for the past couple of weeks, like clockwork. I followed them one morning. I knew where they were heading, straight to that damn motel. This time, I wasn't just watching from the outside. I had my phone ready. I made sure to get the footage of them walking into the same motel where everything had started. Sarah was wearing that ridiculous coat of hers, the one she wore when she thought she was being sexy. Mike was beside her, talking too loud, probably to make sure anyone who was around would hear him. I filmed them from a distance, zooming in when they got to the door. Then I did something I didn't think I would ever do. I sent the video to her parents. Her dad was a quiet man, but he had always liked me. He'd even joked that I was the perfect son-in-law. I knew it would destroy him to see what his daughter had been up to. But it wasn't just for him. It was for her, too. I wanted Sarah to feel the full weight of her choices. It worked. Not in the way I expected, though. The next day, I got a call from her mother. Her voice was shaking, barely holding it together. "You did this, didn't you?" she said, her words cutting through the phone. "Why would you want to ruin her like this? She's your wife. She was your wife. I raised her better than this, but you betrayed her." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She could yell at me all she wanted, but I wasn't the one who'd betrayed anyone. I wasn't the one sleeping around behind their partner's back. And I wasn't the one who had the audacity to pretend everything was fine. It wasn't until later that I got the call from Sarah herself. She was screaming into the phone, calling me every name under the sun. "You had no right to do that," she yelled, her voice distorted by fury. "You think this is funny? You think ruining my life is going to make you feel better?" "I didn't ruin your life, Sarah," I said, calm despite the storm brewing inside me. "You did. You're the one who chose this path. You're the one who thought you could lie and cheat your way through life without consequences. Well, here they are." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She didn't respond for a long time. Then, when she finally did speak, it was just a whisper. "You're evil." "Am I?" I replied, my voice steady, almost indifferent. "Or am I just the one who finally opened your eyes to the truth?" And with that I hung up. She tried to fight back in the following days, posting more inflammatory things about me online, talking to anyone who would listen. She played the victim, trying to paint me as some kind of controlling monster. She spread more lies about how I had stalked her and how I was trying to destroy her career. But none of it worked. She had already lost. The people who had seen the truth, the people who knew what she was capable of, had made up their minds. As for Mike? Well, he wasn't entirely innocent either. I knew about his shady past, the way he'd been caught up in some legal issues years ago. I made a few calls to some people I knew, and within a week, his name was getting dragged through some very unpleasant public records. Turns out, he wasn't as clean as Sarah had thought. He wasn't quite the charming knight in shining armor he pretended to be. And while Sarah was busy dealing with that fallout, I sat back and watched her crumble. I wasn't doing it out of some petty desire to hurt her. I was just making sure the world saw her for who she really was. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel guilty. She had a choice. She made it, and now she had to live with it. And me? I was done being the victim. I was done with the self-doubt, the anger, the constant second-guessing. I was moving on. The divorce process had started in earnest, but there was no turning back. It was a mess, ugly, painful, but at least it was mine now. And I was finally ready to take back what she'd stolen from me. I thought the worst was over. I thought once the lawyer stuff was behind me, once the social media drama had died down, that things would calm down. I could finally start to heal, to move forward. But Sarah had other plans. It started with a call. A private number, the kind you know you're not supposed to answer. But I did anyway, because I thought maybe, just maybe, it was a bill collector or something. That's what I told myself. But no. It was Sarah, and she was crying. I almost hung up, but something in her voice stopped me. She sounded broken, different from the hysterical woman who had screamed at me just days before. Please, please just listen, she begged. I need to explain myself. For a moment I just stood there, staring at the phone. My hand was shaking, and the urge to slam the phone down was overwhelming. But for some reason I didn't. I let her talk. I don't know what happened, okay? She said, her voice shaky. I made a mistake, I know. But it's not all my fault. You never paid attention to me. You were always too busy. You never saw me, really saw me. I was so lonely. I felt a pang of something, maybe pity, maybe anger, I wasn't sure, but I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I've been through a lot, and Mike made me feel special. He actually cared. And now I don't know what to do. I've lost everything, and it's all my fault, and I'm so sorry. I cut her off, not out of malice but because I couldn't take it anymore. Stop, I said. I'm done with this, Sarah. I'm done with your excuses. You betrayed me. You made your choice, and I'm not going to sit here and listen to you try to make it sound like it was my fault. There was silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence that made my skin crawl. I could feel her breathing, but she didn't say anything for what felt like hours. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke again. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you really sure? Once you file the divorce papers, it's final. There's no going back. I'll be out of your life for good. That hit me like a punch to the stomach. Of course, I knew it was final. I'd made up my mind. But hearing her say it out loud, for good, felt like some kind of death sentence. It was like cutting off a limb. I didn't love her anymore, not in the way I used to. But the idea of completely severing ties, of not hearing her voice, seeing her face, ever again, it felt like losing a part of me. But I knew deep down that I wasn't going to get closure from her. There was no magic moment where everything was explained and we both walked away feeling okay. There was no salvaging what had been broken. She had crossed the line, and I had no intention of walking back over it. I'm sure, I said, my voice cold and steady. I'll file for divorce today. And I won't look back. Her sobs came next. They were quiet at first, but then they grew louder, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything, the lies, the affair, the manipulation. She had made her bed. She was going to lie in it. You don't get to manipulate me anymore, Sarah. It's over. And with that I hung up. I didn't give her a chance to say anything else. That day, I went to the lawyer's office and signed the final papers. The divorce was happening, and there was no going back. But Sarah wasn't done yet. The very next morning, I woke up to a surprise. An email, a letter, and a package, each more desperate than the last. The letter was full of apologies, begging me to reconsider. It was a manipulative mess, blaming everyone but her for the affair. She apologized for the hurt she caused, but she never truly took responsibility for anything. Then there was the package. It was a framed photo of us, taken on our honeymoon, a picture of us laughing, happy, with the sun setting behind us. The caption on the back read, "We can still fix this. Please come back." It felt like a slap in the face. She was trying to manipulate me with our past, with the version of us that never existed anymore. It was a final attempt to pull me back into her world of lies. But I saw right through it. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't need to. I was done. Over the next few weeks, everything started to fall into place. The divorce was finalized, and I began the long process of rebuilding my life. I started going out more, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in months. I even started to date again, nothing serious, just getting to know new people and finding a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. Sarah, though, wasn't done with me. She continued to send messages, post passive-aggressive comments online, even showing up at my door in the middle of the night. But every time, I stood my ground. The last time I saw her, she was standing outside my apartment, her face tear-streaked, looking at me with desperation in her eyes. "Please don't do this," she begged. "I'll change. I promise. I love you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just emptiness. "I'm not your savior, Sarah," I said, my voice firm. "You don't need me to fix your mess. You need to fix yourself. And I can't be part of that." With that, I turned around and closed the door. I never heard from her again. And that was the end of it. I had moved on, I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It's funny how you think you'll never get over something, especially when it's something as gut-wrenching as a betrayal. You don't think you'll ever forget the sting of the lies, the anger that bubbles up when you see them living their life like nothing happened, while you're stuck in the wreckage they left behind. But over time you do. You have to. A few months passed after the final confrontation. At first I couldn't help but feel like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for Sarah to pop up again, to somehow reinsert herself into my life. She'd made me paranoid, made me second-guess myself. But eventually, I realized she wasn't coming back. She had moved on to the next target, and I was nothing more than a memory, a painful one, sure, but a memory nonetheless. I'd thrown myself into work, into the things I used to love but had neglected over the years. I began running regularly again, something I used to do before life with Sarah became all-consuming. I would wake up early, lace up my sneakers, and run through the quiet streets of the city, breathing in the cold morning air. It was freeing. It felt like I was taking control again, piece by piece. The divorce wasn't just a legal thing for me, it was a cleansing. I didn't need Sarah to feel whole. I didn't need her approval or her love. I was learning to love myself again, to realize that I was worthy of more than her empty promises. And then there was the dating. It wasn't something I was rushing into, but every now and then, I'd meet someone interesting. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just a chance to connect with someone new, someone who didn't come with a past of lies and deceit. One night I went out with a few friends to this little bar on the outskirts of the city. It was one of those places you only go to if you're looking for something low-key, a place where you can blend in and just enjoy the night. I wasn't expecting anything, just trying to unwind. That's when I met her. Her name was Emma. She was sitting at the bar alone, sipping a drink, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I sat down next to her, and we exchanged a few polite words. We talked about the most random things at first, books, movies, the crazy weather, and for the first time in a long time, I actually laughed. Really laughed. The more we talked, the more I realized she wasn't like anyone I had ever met. She wasn't trying to impress me or make me feel anything. She was just herself. And it felt so good to be in the presence of someone so genuine. We exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks, we went on a couple more dates. Nothing too intense, just getting to know each other at a pace that felt comfortable. It was nice. Really nice. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't constantly thinking about Sarah, about what she'd done, or about how she'd broken me. But with Emma, there was no baggage. There were no comparisons. It was just us, building something new from scratch. And maybe that was the best part, the realization that I didn't have to carry Sarah's ghost with me forever. I didn't have to allow her to ruin every good thing that could come my way. One day, after a few months of getting to know Emma, I found myself thinking, maybe this is what I needed all along. Not just a new relationship, but a reminder that life could be better, that there was more to look forward to than the pain of the past. Emma was different from Sarah. She didn't need me to fix her. She didn't play games. She was real, and for once, I felt like I was being seen, not for what I could give, but for who I was. And that was all I needed. I'd had my fill of drama. The years with Sarah had taught me enough lessons in self-worth and boundaries. Now, I was starting to believe that I was worthy of the kind of love that was mutual, the kind that didn't come with strings attached or hidden agendas. Life, it seemed, had finally started to fall into place. I didn't know where it would lead, or what Emma and I might become, but I was okay with that. For the first time in a long time, I was at peace. And that was enough.